Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call today's regular council meeting to order. Administration, are there any changes to the agenda?
Sir, if it would be acceptable to council, we would like Mr. Rousseau to introduce an individual, new employee here to the town of Hinton, shared with Jasper. And we'd like to add that just to the beginning to the agenda, if that's okay, possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing nothing, motion to adopt. Councilor LaBerge.
Move to adopt the agenda of the regular council meeting as amended.
Thank you, Councilor LaBerge. Council, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. So first order of business then, Mr. Rousseau.
Good afternoon, Council. It's my privilege to introduce to you Mr. Faraz Khan. As you would remember that we applied for a joint grant with the MCCAC for a municipal energy manager. So I'm pleased to introduce Faraz Khan as the joint resource between the town of Jasper and Hinton Town. And he started with Hinton, well, more with Jasper last week, and this week is doing the Hinton round. So he'll be 2 days a week on board with Hinton, based at the ISB building, and then 2 days in Jasper, and then 1 day as a floater, working from our office or from home to collate everything is done during the week. As you would recall, this is a 12-month contract, 80% grant funded, and the 20% is split 50-50 between Jasper and Hinton. So pretty good deal for us. So with that, I wanted to welcome him officially to the town of Hinton.
Welcome. First name, pronounce? Russ.
Faraz. Yeah, so it's nice to meet you all.
So is it appropriate for council to ask any questions if they might have any? Or
You are more than welcome.
Good.
It's your chance.
Council, any questions? Okay, seeing no questions from council, on behalf of council, welcome to Hinton, and we're looking forward to hearing some interesting things that come forward from you.
Thank you, excited to be here.
Excellent.
Thanks, Council.
All right, that moves us to council minutes for adoption. Councilor Hawes.
I'd like to move that we adopt the regular meeting of council minutes for March 15th, 2022, committee of the whole meeting March 22nd, 2022, and the special meeting of council for March 29th, 2022.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. That brings us to citizens' minute with council. Are there any citizens who would like to speak to council today? None. Are there any citizens who requested to speak to council via Zoom?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, that brings us to our first delegation and presentation. Rural Development Network, presented by Paula Shea, Dina Fuller, Elnaz Aliassel, Jade Roche. And I hope I didn't screw up anybody's name too badly.
Hi there. No, you got mine right for sure. Thanks for having us here today. I'm Dina Fuller, the Executive Director at HELP, and I'm here with my coworker Paula, our English Language Coordinator, and Jade and Elnaz from the Rural Development Network in Edmonton. So back in 2020, we partnered to pilot a project in Hinton that aims to provide anti-discrimination training to local service providers with goals of modeling best anti-discrimination practices and support creating a welcoming and inclusive community for newcomers. So this project was funded by the Multiculturalism, Indigenous, and Inclusion Grant. The long-term goal of the project is to better understand the experiences of newcomers in rural Alberta and to provide resources for other communities across Alberta to collect qualitative data to help inform future programs and policies that impact newcomers. I'm going to turn this over to Jade and Elnaz right now, and they have a short presentation for us.
Thanks, Dina and Paula. I've got some our slides here. So very quickly, if you just let me know if you see the slides.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
See them. Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you to the council for allowing us to present our project today with HELP. We're very grateful for their support and partnership over this last year. My name is Jade Roche, and I'm the Director of Rural Immigration at the Rural Development Network. And I'm joined today by my colleague Elnaz, who is the Program Manager for Rural Immigration. So over the next 10 minutes, we'll provide an overview of RDN, some of the key findings from our project with HELP, and discuss some key considerations when it comes to rural immigration. So for those of you who may not be aware of our organization, the Rural Development Network originated in Alberta as the Alberta Rural Development Network and actually started as a partnership of Alberta's 21 public post-secondary institutions. And we expanded to a national organization in 2020. So our approach as an organization is founded on supporting communities in their efforts to address social issues. We listen to hear and understand community needs and provide support by developing solutions with them. And each solution is tailored to reflect the uniqueness of the residents it aims to serve. We support communities by providing access to innovative tools and resources, providing expertise and capacity where needed, and helping communities to access funding to seed projects and support in general advocacy to amplify the rural voice. So here's a bit of an overview of some of the work that we do. We currently have 8 initiatives, including affordable housing through our Sustainable Housing Initiative. We work on rural homelessness and manage the federal Reaching Home funding for rural Alberta, and also have a health and wellness initiative. The Rural Immigration Initiative, which Elnaz and I work under, was launched in 2019 in response to new government programs that have been put in place to attract newcomers to small centers, as well as some of the emerging needs that we were hearing from our community partners. Our vision is that rural communities have increased capacity to support settlement and integration of immigrants and refugees while fostering more welcoming communities. So we aim to do this by engaging with rural communities and immigrant communities to better understand what their needs and issues are, focus on capacity building efforts with communities to support settlement and integration through training and workshops, and again, coordinating efforts to create more welcoming communities. So with that, I'll pass things over to Elnaz to talk about this project.
So Welcome to Hinton was a one-year project funded by the government of Alberta. The project aim was to conduct qualitative community-based research on barriers that immigrants in Hinton experience to their full social participation, and to model best practices and promote inclusion in Hinton through a train-the-trainer model. So in order to understand these barriers, we did multiple studies, starting with developing community profile, which included a needs assessment of existing services and gaps in Hinton, as well as information about immigrant population. Next, we had more in-depth studies, including focus groups and interviews. We facilitated focus groups with community-based organizations, a roundtable discussion to understand the interaction of these organizations with newcomers. And that was followed by a semi-structured interviews with immigrants living in Hinton. As the next phase of the project, we did the analysis of findings from previous steps, and the outcome of this analysis was a community information sheet for general public, so that to enhance the awareness on newcomer issues and the available services. Also, an action plan was developed to propose recommendations, as well as a training for community-based organizations on anti-discrimination and newcomer integration in Hinton. So some of the settlement issues that we heard included English language. So one of the most common barriers, which was English language, and it also impacts the access to other services as well. Another is the access to lawyers and translators for many topics such as permanent residency, work permit related documents, workplace issues, and issues even with landlords. The immigrants need a lawyer, which is not only a huge expense, but also accessible in farther away and larger communities like Edmonton. Working hour limit is another issue. Like many of the immigrants are working in general jobs, which requires working different shifts, including night shifts, and that can limit their chances to participate in social events. And also in some cases, they have limitations on their employment, limiting them only for one particular job, and that can be leading to economic burden on their family. And finally, having no family or friends in the community, which leads to social isolation. So knowing that what are the needs of newcomers in Hinton, we have that information at this point. So what is next? As a part of this project, we developed an action plan, which included actionable recommendations under 6 strategies. And for today's presentation, we have brought up 2 of those strategies that we thought would be the most relevant ones. So the employment support is one of the most important aspects. Examples of actions for this strategy includes developing partnership with settlement organizations outside of Hinton to refer immigrants to employment and other settlement support, or facilitating opportunities for peer support and mentoring is another recommendation under this strategy. So outcome of these kind of actions will be that newcomers gain fulfilling employment and that barriers to workplace integration will be reduced. So RDN is starting a new project where communities can get involved to support workplace integration through employment training. And we will be sending out an EOI in the coming months, which we can share the information with our contacts in Hinton. And another relevant strategy is welcoming and inclusive communities. Actions such as hosting community events that support social integration for newcomers and community connections, or preparing and disseminating welcome packages will be so effective in facilitating the settlement of immigrants and introducing the community and making connection. So these steps makes newcomer feel supported while integrating into their new home. And it's good to mention that some of the immigrants we interviewed mentioned how they found the welcome package upon their arrival in Hinton so helpful. That being said, I will pass it back to Jay to talk about the recent government immigration streams.
Thanks, Elnaz. So with the completion of this project, we did want to talk about 2 new immigration streams that the provincial government had launched that are designed specifically to help spread the economic benefits of immigration to rural communities and create greater opportunities for newcomers. So these streams are the Rural Renewal Stream and Rural Entrepreneurship Stream. So the Rural Renewal Stream, this stream supports attraction and retention of newcomers to rural Alberta and takes a community-driven approach to support local economic development needs and the growth of the community. And so right now, actually, there's an application call open for communities wishing to participate. So communities that meet the criteria can apply to be a designated community under this program. And for the Rural Entrepreneurship Stream, entrepreneurs who want to start a business or buy an existing business in rural Alberta can submit an expression of interest. And communities that wish to participate can submit a community enrollment form online and also be listed on the website. So based on this project and our continued work with HELP, we wanted to share these because we believe with this new information, Hinton is really well positioned to participate in programs such as Lease because of this increased understanding of what the needs are of newcomers and new partnerships to support and address possible gaps that may exist. I did also want to mention that we will be presenting at the Economic Developers of Alberta conference later in this week. So if anybody from Hinton will be there, feel free to connect with us and we'll be talking more so about the workplace integration. So to conclude, we wanted to share, based on what we discussed today, some possible next steps for the council to consider. So the first is to explore these new rural immigration streams and assess the economic development needs in the community and see if it might make sense to explore this further. Review the action plan that Elnaz spoke about once available. Continue to engage with newcomers and community organizations to understand any changing needs. And RDN is happy to support or provide additional capacity if needed in the form of training, toolkits, resources, and research. So to conclude, immigration can support economic growth and promote innovation in Hinton while enriching the vibrancy and diversity of rural Alberta. Thank you again for the opportunity to present today, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have. I've also provided Elna's contact information on the last slide if anybody would like to reach out. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for that presentation. Council, are there any comments or questions? Councillor LaBerge?
Thanks for the presentation. I think this is where small communities are really going to start to compete, go forward. The action plan you talked about, when do you think that'll be available?
So the action plan should be available within the next month or so. We're just confirming some of the final details and putting it together in a nice format. So we'll be sure to share that with you through help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Council? Okay, seeing nothing further from council, once more, I'd like to thank everyone for your presentation today. Thank you.
Thanks.
That brings us to our second delegation today, Wild Mountain Music Festival, Autumn Festival, presented by Rob Drew. Mr. Drew.
Sir, if I could, Mr. Drew has provided copies of his presentation. I believe you all have them. If you do not, I have copies here. He's made available to be distributed. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of both festivals. I'm involved in both, obviously. The first one is the Bylaw Music Festival for July 15th, 16th, and 17th of this year. There was sponsorship in effect from the town of Hinton, which,
Rob?
yes,
I think Stuart's having a hard time hearing. Can you just pull the mic up so people can hear?
you hear me
Thanks.
now, Stuart?
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge.
Thanks, Brian. In regards to the festival, we did have sponsorship in place that was from 2020, which was $5,000 plus the stage if required. If the stage wasn't required, then 12 tickets would go towards the council or actually to the CAO to disperse among the staff however he wished. Due to the festival being canceled and changed to 2021, the money that we had already received went back, which of course it's not our money, right? So we sent it back. Under the condition, it would go to 2021, which then 221 was canceled and went to 222. Well, we're going to have it this year, one way or the other, people. So what I'm asking for is for the council to reinstate the finances that was agreed upon, which was $5,000, and the stage. If there's no stage, the 12 tickets would come to the council or to CAO. That's the Wild Mountain Music Festival.
Council, are there any comments or questions regarding that? Councillor Magoon?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I think Councillor Haas was up before me.
Oh,
if I may.
Councillor Haas, then Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess it's a question more for administration. Thank you for sharing. I guess back in, and I don't recall where that money came from at the time. Was it a community grant?
It was through Scott Kovac.
Okay.
Economic development.
It was economic
Yeah.
development. Okay. So I guess that's my question, to the administration, because I'm assuming it came from that budget. I don't know if it was budgeted for this year or not, but I mean, can administration make any comment on?
Sir, through Councillor Haas to all of council, it was not included in this year's budget, but administration has identified the ability to cover this out of council's discretionary line item, and there is room available for that. And then the second part of the request would be simply accommodating the stage request, and that is administrative.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, good, Councillor Haas. Okay, Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, and then if I could just follow up with administration on both of those same points then. Do we have, I can't recall it right now, was it What was the total available in our discretionary fund out of this year's budget? Was it 7?
I apologize, I'm looking, I'm not sure if.
If
if
admin
Ms.
doesn't
Wade-
have it right now, that's fine. I guess to the rest of council, my personal feelings on that is that I think this would be a fully appropriate thing to sponsor out of the discretionary fund. It's just my personal perspective.
Interim CAO.
Sir, thank you. And through Deputy Mayor to all of council, there is $20,000 in the budget this year.
Councillor Magoon, follow up?
Yeah, just on the stage then, and I apologize for confirming CAO. I just want to make sure I stay in my lane. It's administration's intention to follow up regarding the stage with Wild Mountain, or does it need to be a direction of council?
My preference would be allow us to deal with it operationally and assist with the festival. I believe the critical item here today is the funding request.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, sir.
Councillor Magoon, Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I know we're dealing with the $5,000 ask right now, but my recollection on that stage is we never just give it, for free. I think it's what, $350 a day, something like that. That money always has to come out of somewhere. So.
Can I further say something about that? In 2019, we did get money from the town, and also we had to pay for the stage, which was $1,240 for the weekend.
For the whole weekend.
For the whole weekend, yes.
Right.
Of course, things changed in 2020 where we asked for more money and substituted the stage for giving you tickets. Okay, that's how that worked, which is basically an equal value.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
We didn't see where we were getting money from the town and then turning around and have to pay it back. That didn't make sense to us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council? Councillor Magoon?
I'm always, I guess before I make the motion, I would put the question to council just to be a little bit more tactful. I suppose I would be comfortable making a motion tonight. I know it sort of is off the cuff, but it's pretty simple. $5,000 donation to come from council contingency. But I'd like to know sort of how the rest of council feels before I make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. I'll go to Councillor Taylor.
How much is the county giving you?
Mr. Drew?
You mean Yellowhead?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're in negotiations with them. They're up to 5,000, but we're not sure yet. We're just doing the paperwork with them right now. They always give us money every year though, but I don't know those amounts.
okay.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council? I guess I would have a question. When does the festival need to know if the sponsorship dollars have been secured or not?
No, right now, right? But as soon as it's able, it's not a pressing matter, but we're trying to get everything in line for sponsorship before the middle of May so that we can get the posters out listing the sponsors, which the town of Hinton would be one, plus get our t-shirts made, get everything, get it on the air, stuff like that.
Yeah. So a couple of weeks would probably not be a big deal at all.
Wouldn't make any difference to me, no.
Okay. So I'd speak to that then, because this is an unbudgeted item and it will have impacts because it's going to require some money being transferred between budgets, or if it comes out of council's contingency fund, it can affect expenditures moving forward. We've just entered this year. We've got 9 months of the year yet to go. So this is definitely something that it sounds like council would like to consider, but I would like to see it come back to a standing so we can have a discussion, some information from administration on what might be impacted, and then it could come back to the next regular for decision. Just a suggestion. Council? Council? Councillor Hawes?
Yeah, I confirm, because was going to ask the question too, if administration had plans of then bringing this forward, but I too would, I think it warrants at least that discussion, to hear from administration, have a bit of a report on it, and, and to at least know where those finances are coming from. So if it's works for the organization to wait a couple of weeks, I'd, personally prefer that as
It
well.
works
So,
fine for me. The cutoff date is when we get everything on the billboards, stuff like that. You gotta start making up the t-shirts with names on there. If you miss that deadline, well, I can't do anything about it.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
I think a council discussion would be appropriate in light of the fact that, like you said, we just finalized a budget. And we're looking at a non-urgent, non-emergency activity outside a budget cycle. And we kind of discussed this principle when we discussed the fireworks, as to if you add something new to the budget, fantastic. How are you going to pay for it? Because if we start taking money out of the council contingency fund this early on in the year, it's going to be a couple months till we don't have any contingency fund at all. So maybe there's an opportunity to cut down something that is less important than this for us. And that was the funding principle, I believe, that we all kind of bought into when we were talking about the fireworks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon?
I'd like to try a direction then, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
I'd like to direct that administration bring forward options regarding a donation to the Wild Mountain Music Festival to the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 12th. And if I can just check with administration that that's acceptable in terms of a date.
Sir, in order for us to bring this back to April 19th council meeting, yes, and we'll return with a brief report indicating funding possibilities and options for the consideration of council. There'll be an opportunity to discuss on April 12th, and that would allow us to bring it back for a possible direction on April 19th.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm good.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Taylor?
Did you want to put funding options in your wording, Councillor McGowan? Because I think that's what you meant.
Councillor Magoon?
I'm certainly willing to accept that as a friendly amendment, Councillor Taylor. I think that was certainly what was intended.
I think it's a good idea to be specific if you could. Do I have to say something to make that happen?
I believe, sir, we'll just get this up and see if this satisfies Councillors Magoon and Taylor.
Funding option.
Would you like the funding amount, $5,000 in there?
Councillor Magoon?
If I may, I think probably the most appropriate way would be to put funding before options. And I think it deals with Councillor Taylor's concern and clarifies things.
So bring forward funding options?
Yeah.
If I could, sir, to Councillor Magoon, would that be regarding a $5,000 donation to the, could we put that amount in there?
That would be my intention.
Okay.
Simply because that had been the past practice.
Thank you.
Great. Councillor Magoon, you're good with the changes?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay.
Am I supposed to see something here?
Yeah, 1 second, Councillor Taylor. Is that shareable with Councillor Taylor?
I can share.
That's good, Councillor Taylor. Okay, excellent. Okay,
Can you see it?
I gave the
Gave
thumbs
thumbs
up,
up.
so I guess if not, he's okay with it anyway.
I have the wrong share.
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council? Any comments, questions, debate regarding the proposed motion? Okay, seeing none, if we could see the motion again. Councillor Magoon moves to direct administration bring forward funding options regarding a $5,000 donation to the Wild Mountain Music Festival to the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 12th, 2022. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Drew, is there anything further?
Yeah, step 2,
All
Autumn
right.
Festival.
Well, just before we move to step 2, council, is there anything further regarding the Wild Mountain Music Festival? Okay, seeing nothing?
Okay, step 2, last year, September 11th, we had a small festival in the Green Square with about 550 people arriving from the town. It was a free event that was actually approached to the Rotary Club, to the motorcycle people, to Wild Mountain Music Festival in regards to putting on an event, and the town was the one that did the approaching. It was quite a success. If you all had seen it, it was really good for the town at that time. It was supposed to be a 1-year thing. Then right after it happened, our mayor approached us and wanted to know if we would continue doing it for 2 more years, increasing the cost from $3,000 to $5,000 so we could pay the bands that were there for free. Basically, we paid their expenses. So that got shelved this year too. So what was approached at that time was that the increase from 3,000 to 5,000 on a 2-year deal, 5,000 each year, and that Dawn would supply the infrastructure that we couldn't get, which was the stage, of course, the picnic tables, the garbage cans, and the road barriers. That was all supplied. My understanding from what I was told in November, it was in the budget, but only the CAO would know if it was or wasn't, so. So I'm asking for that too.
Okay. All right. So I guess we'll go first to ICAO Hanlon to clarify whether that was a budget item in the budget or not.
Sir, through you to the whole of council, I do not believe it made its way into the budget. It would have been under the economic development area, but that did see a cut. So it would be similarly something that could be brought forward for a more fulsome discussion with council and a decision at a later date.
Thank you, ICAO Hanlon. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I guess look at administration. And I don't want to create more work for it's maybe possible to have that similar conversation, but I'm just wondering about the community grant program of applying potentially to that for that event. Is that, because I believe we're coming up on, I think there's 2 installments of that. I'm just wondering if that's something to consider the group on, to work with administration to put in an application for that potentially, being as how it wasn't in the budget potentially. So that's just a thought I was having for this. It's a community event, but we have $60,000 in that kitty. So with two installments. So it's just a thought for the group. So I don't know what the rest of council thinks of that. Maybe we want to have a conversation about looking at funding for it, but that's an option. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. ICAO Hanlon.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to actually ask Laura if she could speak to this item in regards to Councillor Hawes's question about the possibility through our community grant, the first round of grants, if this would be a suitable application that could be considered under that grant program.
Thank you, ICAO Hanlon through to Council. I believe, and sorry, Miss Way may not be on this evening. And I think her area manages that. Off the top of my head, based on the ask tonight, that would be something that probably qualifies. I believe they're doing a spring and a fall intake. But again, I don't think there's anybody else on line here that could answer that more clearly. My apologies.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything further, ICAO Hanlon?
Sir, I was going to suggest that certainly administration would be prepared to investigate this further and get back to Mr. Daru in the next day or so with an update on the possibility of this being considered in the first round of intakes. And we would then report back to council at the committee of the whole meeting next week on the possibility of this qualifying for that grant application.
Great. Okay, council, is there anything further? Councillor Race?
Thank you, sir. Quick question. Has Wild Mountain ever made application to the grant for grants?
Yes.
Yes,
They have, you have? Okay, good.
many.
So you're familiar with the process?
Yes, it's not my department. It's Lane C. Brooks and Barb Marchand's department. They do that.
Okay, good.
And I know there's some in the works.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor LaBerge?
I guess, so we went to this group and said, you guys know how to do music festivals, so would you do this music festival for us? And now we're asking them to do it again, and now we said, but we don't have any money for you, so go away and figure out how to fill out a grant so you can do this music festival for us. It just doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, sure, let's do that in the fall, but hopefully we're gonna give them some help and not just say, go away and do this. It's your job. Tell us if you get the money so you can do the festival for us. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So hopefully we're going to get the festival some help with that. I know it's such a pain to get through that process. So just my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Haas?
Yeah, and to Councillor LaBerge, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that, and I don't want to create more work for the group. Unfortunately, and I wish Mayor Michaels was here this evening, but I'm not familiar with any conversation of council on the Autumn Festival and the funding of it. If it's a conversation that was done with the mayor, I'm not familiar as a councillor that ever got to this table. And I guess that's where I'm at right now, is it never hit the budget process. And, you know, this is a conversation that was had without the rest, and that's where I guess I'm at. I mean, I think for me, if it was me, if you go and you're never guaranteed to get the full amount, because of course the group come together and weigh all the things. But I mean, if there was a possibility of getting some funding through that, and then look at if need more funding at the time, then we could look at it. Just the fact that it was such a tight budget year this year, unfortunately, you know. But I'm looking forward to see what ICO Hanlon brings back and see. But I too don't want to create more work for you. It just didn't hit that budget process at that time. So I'm happy to do the 5,000 potentially in the contingency, but this is another 5 that, you know, maybe there's another way of getting that. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. We'll go to Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, that was kind of my question too. Like, was there a direction of council to say, go ahead and do this? If there was, that's one thing. If one member of council makes a commitment on behalf of the other 6 or 7 of us, that's something completely different. It can't be done. And the advantage of the community grant program is that it gets us some of the best proposals with the limited amount of money that we have available, because we're going to get lots of groups coming to us asking money throughout the year, and it's not possible to say yes to all of them. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I think no one else on the list right now, and I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a question. With the hope that both of these festivals go ahead, the smaller fall one and and the traditional Wild Mountain Music Festival. If there were only funds to fund one of them, which would be the most critical to get the funding for to ensure that it went ahead in the best way possible?
Putting me on the spot, right?
Well, I mean, I could give a third option too if you wanted. Like if it's absolutely critical that that Wild Mountain gets it, and it means that it comes at the expense of the Fall Festival. I mean, that's an option too.
It's both would be great, but my loyalties are the Wild Mountain Music Festival. Okay, the Autumn Festival is a town initiative that approached us, so that's not my top priority. And that's the only way I can see it. Do I wish the Autumn Festival went ahead? Yes, it's really good for the communities in the Green Square, and I know they all are pushing. I've got lots of calls about it, but my loyalties are to Wild Mountain Music Festival first.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you. Councilor Magoon.
Yeah, and I guess I'll sort of chime in here. Yeah, I think understanding that that was a bit of a town-led initiative to really take advantage of the time and the context of what was going on for the community. I'd love to see that initiative continue. And because of that, I hope that you're comfortable coming back. You know, I have every faith that administration will work with you through the granting process. But if things become difficult, I hope you're comfortable coming back or getting in touch with us and saying, hey, look, this is a little bit more complicated than we originally thought, and sort of give us an update on how things are going.
Absolutely.
Okay. And the good news is at that point, I'm sure the mayor will be back and, you know, we'll be at full strength. So
yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, we have lots of time. That Autumn Festival is until September 10th. So nothing's going to happen till, you know, after the Wild Mountain Festival is over anyway. I mean, it'll all be set up, but it won't actually get out there until then.
And it gave me a good reason to ride my motorcycles.
Yeah. I missed last year's ride.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council? All right, seeing nothing further from council then, thank you for your presentation today, Mr. DeRue, and council will be discussing this further, and I'm sure you'll be hearing something from administration not too far away.
Great, thank you much for your time. I appreciate it. And
thanks.
We'll see you out there. Yep. Tickets are on sale, make sure you buy it.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, that brings us to the first public hearing of the evening, and that is for Devonshire Borewing Bylaw 1167. The following public hearing is held pursuant to Section 258 of the Municipal Government Act, being Chapter M26 RSA 2000 and amendments thereto. The following rules of conduct will be followed during this public hearing. Presentation should be brief and to the point. The order of presentation shall be entry of written submissions, those supporting the bylaw, those opposing the bylaw, and any other person deemed to be affected by the bylaw. Council may ask questions of the speakers after each presentation for clarification purposes. There will be no debating the bylaw. However, questions to the councillors or other parties will be accepted through the chair. I hereby declare the public hearing related to the bylaw open. Secretary?
The purpose of the proposed bylaw number 1167 is for a debenture of $820,000 required for site servicing for the development of the Bhutan lands. The site servicing is required to facilitate the construction of affordable housing associated with the Canadian Housing and Mortgage Rapid Housing Initiative, as shown on Schedule A. First reading was given to bylaw number 1167 on March 1st, 2022. Notice of this public hearing was advertised in the Hinton Voice newspaper on March 11th and March 18th, 2022, and advertised on the Town of Hinton website.
Thank you. Are there any late written submissions relating to bylaw number 1167?
No, there is not.
Thank you. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in favor of bylaw number 1167? Anybody by Zoom?
No.
No. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition to bylaw number 1167? Again, anyone by Zoom? Is there anyone present who is deemed to be affected by bylaw number 1167 and wishes to speak? Again, anyone via Zoom? No, thank you. Do the councillors have any further questions? Councillor Race?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To administration, the $820,000 is for site servicing of phase 1, but how does that 820 affect phase 2?
To administration?
Thank you through the chair to all of council and Councillor Race. So with the additional funds, whatever is not used to service the first portion of phase 1, which would be the smaller home area, will be used to service phase 2 of that area, the next adjacent area.
But does it also, sorry, may I?
Yep, follow up.
Does it also allow access from phase 2, to hook up to infrastructure that has, kind of been brought into phase 2?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Race, yes. Yes, so approximately 620 will be used for the, to facilitate the servicing for the tiny home area, which is coming off of a different road, and then the remainder funding will be used to access the phase 2 portion of development.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council? Councillor Taylor?
How many units are now planned at the Bhutan Lands projects? We were thinking about adding a few extra. Have any extra being added now?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. To administration?
Thank you through the chair to all of council and Councillor Taylor. At this point, we have a meeting set up for tomorrow with the project managers, and we will be discussing the tenders that have been received with those proponents. We have not identified how many units at this present time. Those are details to be fleshed out still.
Thank you.
Yes, and it has been noted already that we want as many as possible in there, more than 8, but at the minimum it is 8 to satisfy the terms of the grant.
Great, thank you. Council? Councillor Race?
Thank you, sir. The size of each home, is it 900 square feet? Or can you give us a bit of a figure on how large the square footage is?
Yes, thank you through the chair to Councillor Race. Yes, it's approximately 900 square feet.
And that would be for each?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, I just want to remind everybody here that we are discussing the Devonshire bylaw number 1167, not the details of the development. So if we could try to keep comments and questions related to the bylaw, please. Is there anything further, Council? All right. Do the councillors require any further information? If not, Councillor LaBerge.
Maybe I will move then. That council give debenture borrowing bylaw 1167 Bhutan Land Development second and third reading. No?
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge, but this is just the public hearing portion of the meeting. So once the public
Trying to
hearing
move
portion.
past that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we all try to be efficient. So if not, I hereby declare that the public hearing related to bylaw number 1167 is closed and will accept a motion to adjourn. Councillor Haas.
I'd like to move that we adjourn this public hearing.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Public hearing is adjourned. And that brings us to our second public hearing of the evening, public hearing on bylaw number 1168. The The following public hearing is held pursuant to section 2642AB and 2661 of the Municipal Government Act, being chapter M26 RSA 2000 and amendments thereto. The following rules of conduct will be followed during this public hearing. Presentation should be brief and to the point. The order of presentation shall be entry of written submissions, those supporting the bylaw, those opposing the bylaw, and any other person deemed to be affected by the bylaw. Council may ask questions of the speakers after each presentation for clarification purposes. There will be no debating the bylaw. However, questions to the councillors or other parties will be accepted through the chair. I hereby declare the public hearing related to the bylaw open.
The purpose of this proposed bylaw number 1168 is to provide a lease guarantee to CWB National Leasing for the repayment of lease between CWB National Leasing and the Hinton Golfing Society, the purchase of new golf carts for the Hinton Golf Course, as shown in Schedule A. First reading was given to bylaw number 1168 on March 1st, 2022. Notice of this public hearing was advertised in the Hinton Voice newspaper on March 11th and March 18th, 2022, and advertised on the Town of Hinton website.
Thank you. Are there any late written submissions relating to bylaw number 1168?
No, there are none.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in favor of bylaw number 1168? Anyone via Zoom?
No, nobody did.
Thank you. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition to bylaw number 1168? Anyone via Zoom? Is there anyone present who is deemed to be affected by bylaw number 1168 and wishes to speak? Anyone via Zoom? Thank you. Do the councillors have any further questions? Council? Councillor LeBerge?
So I understand the math of this. On the analysis part of the summary that was given to us, it talks about this. It says the remaining balance January 13th, 2021 on the current golf cart lease of $37,117 is not included in the calculation below. But it's included in this lease deal, isn't it? Like there's not an outstanding balance of 38 grand that needs to get paid, is there?
To administration.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Labarge. It is included as part of a trade agreement with the old carts going to that company.
Oh, okay,
and the
thank
new-
you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBerge. Council? Seeing no further questions, do the councillors require further information? If not, I hereby declare that the public hearing related to bylaw number 1168 is closed and will accept a motion to adjourn. Council? Councillor LeBerge. Thank you, Councillor LeBerge. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to first old business item of the evening. Devonshire borrowing bylaw number 1167, Bhutan land development. Administration.
Sir, through you to all of council, speaking to page 36 of your agenda package, this is an opportunity to now consider the feedback from the earlier public hearing. And the recommended action is that council give debenture borrowing bylaw number 1167, the Bhutan land development, second and third reading. Council has heard the background and has had an opportunity to review the package. Administration is available to answer any further questions and is just seeking the direction of council at this time. Thank you, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, ICAO Hanlon. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, very high level question to administration, and I know we've been through this, pardon me, but again, for anybody who's watching at home or hasn't followed, in short, this debenture, which will allow us to develop the services in the area, is essentially, forgive the phrasing, acts as a doorway to the development of future phases, which will lead to the development of future doors later on down the road. And it's essential for that to take place. Is that correct?
Administration?
Deputy Mayor, through you to Councillor Magoon, to all of council, yes, that is correct. I will just remind council that this is part of the town's commitment to the grant through the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation. So we are offering the land and the servicing as our contribution. And in exchange, there is for the construction, the completion of site, so landscaping, sidewalks, lighting, etc. Not lighting, excuse me. Other improvements beyond the servicing, that is just over $2.1 million coming from Canadian Mortgage and Housing through the grant. And this is our portion of securing the grant. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, administration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, Councillor Haas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we give debenture bylaw, borrowing bylaw number 1167 of the Bhutan Land Development second reading.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, we have a motion before us now. Councillor Taylor?
I can't vote yes at this time because I've got not enough information on the number of units. I'm not comfortable with 8 units because 8 units to me means we're treating the government grant like it's free money, and this affordable at that price, unless we get more units than that, this affordable housing is simply not really affordable for the 2 taxpayer pockets that this has to come out with. Not a viable project that we should be undertaking as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Haas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Based on those comments by Councillor Taylor, I guess to administration, as an organization, we've been granted this grant by the federal government, and what risk to our community potentially, if we weren't to pass this, we would basically lose the grant, is what I'm guessing. And also the other risk is, and I'm no expert in grants, but we lose that grant, then future grants we may not be also recommended or opportunities for. And I hear, I mean, this is, our hands are kind of tied a little bit in regards to how much the grant and what their expectations are of the federal government. So I guess that's where I'm at is this is an opportunity. Council has invested a great deal of dollars into this area. This is an opportunity to start developing in that area. It's also opening it up, as Councillor Magoon mentioned, that this is also investment dollars towards another area. So we're getting kind of, in my words, two birds with one stone, if I may. It may seem, a little, crude, but that's how I see it. This is a investment into our community and into that area of the land. So, to administration, if we don't pass the second and third reading, what risk are we at of losing that grant?
Thank you, Councillor Haas. To administration.
Deputy Mayor, through you to Councillor Haas, to all of council. If we are unable to pass the debenture borrowing bylaw and fulfill our end of the agreement with CMHC, my understanding is we would lose this grant. We are in a time-sensitive situation around the debenture. There is an intake date at the end of April, and so administration is seeking second and third reading here today. I would like to just share with council that the identification or the selection of the number of units has not been primarily driven by the town of Hinton. And what I mean by that is there is funding conditions from the federal government requiring ISO 9000 standards for the manufacturer, certain LEED certification standards for the construction of these units, which do affect cost. And so certainly, as had been indicated earlier, our hope is to see additional units constructed. And I hope that that is the case. But administration understands that we would risk losing the grant. Speculating on whether in the future we'd be successful or unsuccessful with CMHC, I would hope we would be and continue to be a viable partner with them. And so my hope is that whatever the direction of council may be here today, that we can continue to work with the federal government and the province on addressing affordable housing in the town of Hinton. Thank you.
Thank you, ICA O'Hanlon. Councillor Magoon, did I see your?
I think Councillor.
I do have Councillor.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, please, thank you.
Councillor Race and then Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, sir. So also, the grant is contingent on having a home or homes built by, what is it, October? Is that true?
To administration.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Race. Yes, you're correct. There is a requirement for a minimum occupancy of 25% of the units by October of this year. Thank you.
So, you know, my fear is delaying this process, getting it going, could hamper us from meeting that 25%, you know, that we need to meet. And also lumber prices are going up again as we speak, truly. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to build off Councillor Race's question before I make my own comments, I can only assume that administration's making this recommendation because they believe that that 25% occupancy rate is achievable given the conditions that we have. I have to assume that, but I'd just like to confirm it in public.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Administration.
Deputy Mayor, through you to Councillor Magoon, to all of council, yes, it is our belief that it remains a viable target for the 25% occupancy.
May I comment on the motion then, Mr. Chair? Yep. Perfect. Yeah, then I'm fully in support of the motion that's on the floor. Again, I think it's you cannot simply consider the number 8 as the end goal of this project. We've heard from administration that when they go to tender and when they discuss this with possible developers, that this is not the goal, simply 8. Also, again, it's really important to emphasize that phase 2 doesn't happen without the development that happens in this phase. You don't get phase 2 without the development that happens in phase 1. That's just a simple fact. This is a matter of political will. We have not seen a lot of affordable housing developed in the last little while. We've certainly had some good partnerships in the community that we're thankful for, but this is something that happens out of political will. And so if the town of Hinton, if council deems that this is something important, we have grant funding that's available that does not come along every day, then we have to action. I think we have a responsibility to do this. I think we have quite a good deal, given the fact that this will service not just 1, but 2 phases. And if we don't do this, then we don't have either phase, and we've done nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks. $400,000 for a 900 square foot house is just simply not how I would spend my own money, and that's how I gauge how I make decisions. But I do hope that the number, even though I won't support this, I do hope that as it goes ahead, the number of units built gets higher and higher to bring the price down to what I consider to be a more reasonable unit, and that would make it a successful project in my mind if we could get more units. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council. Okay, seeing nothing further from council, all the motion to question.
Council Hawes, yeah, I was just confirming second reading.
Just, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
just a second. Councillor Hawes moved that council give Devonshire bylaw number 1167, Bhutan Land Development, second reading. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried 6-1. Just a clarification to administration procedurally. My understanding is, sorry, because first reading's already passed and second reading is now passed, we don't need unanimous consent to move forward to third reading. Is that correct?
Sir, through you to all of council, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Magoon?
So, and I apologize, Mr. Chair, with respect, I think you had just said 6-1, but we're short of 5-1 from the mayor's go.
Oh,
I apologize for that.
Yeah, no, my apologies too. Sorry, carried 5-1.
And if I may make a motion?
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you. I'd like to move that council give debenture borrowing bylaw number 1167, Bhutan Land Development, third reading.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion before us. Any comments or questions? Councillor Haas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a comment about, this, we've talked a lot about housing in our community for quite a long time, last term before that, now into this term. And this opportunity, this land that we, purchased, I'm just happy to see that we're taking action forward to start developing that land. It may be a small piece of it, but the future of it really depends on this. And I'm looking forward to see what, that area brings, and then what that second phase can potentially look like with that infrastructure that's going to be, or the services that's going to be developed as a result of that. So excited to see this area, start to develop and start to build. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council? Councillor Race?
Thank you, sir. I have to go back to what Councillor Magoon said. It starts with us or it stops with us. And I really want it to start with us. This is progress. We get through phase 1, and I'll tell you, we are introducing phase 2. So I totally will support this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council? I'll be speaking in favor of this as well. I fully support this moving forward. I'm just going to leave it at that for now, actually. Thank you. Council, anything further? Seeing no one, would call the motion to question. Councillor Magoon has moved that council give debenture borrowing bylaw number 1167 Bhutan Land Development third reading. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? And that was also carried 5-1. Council, anything further on debenture borrowing bylaw number 1167?
I do have.
Councillor Race?
So, okay. So tomorrow you said you're having a meeting. So tomorrow, if you hear 10 homes is what we can do, how will that affect the information that we went through tonight?
To administration.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Race. The debenture bylaw is for our development of the services. So we just need to finalize the number of units to provide the servicing. So the servicing cost will remain the same. It won't have any impact on the numbers of units as such.
I may, Councillor Race, just to add to that, that the capacity of the design for the servicing does allow for in excess of 8. In fact, it's going to be much higher than 10 units, because the servicing allows for phase 2, which really phase 2 adds to phase 1, if you know what I mean. So everything that flows from phase 2 is going to go into phase 1. So we had to design it so that phase 1 is actually over capacity, if I may call it that. So that's phase 2 can be accommodated. So whether we go to 20 units for argument's sake versus 8 units, we will still have the capacity to service the lands. And further to Councillor Magoon's comment and Councillor Haas is that we're actually plowing forward in terms of what we're putting in for future development. So we're spending money ahead of time. So as Debbie, my colleague, has just advised, it's about 615,000 to do just phase 1 if we just had to service that. But that's why we asked for the 820 to be ahead of the curve, so that next time when we do develop the units, be it duplexes or single housing, we're able to just put the housing down and connect it to those servicing.
Thank you. Councillor Race, are you good?
Yeah, I am good, and I'm hoping tomorrow we get good news and it's 10, and then we can carry on and be happy. Thank you.
I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that because I just want to clarify to make absolutely sure that I understand. So regardless of whether it's decided that there's, there can be 8, there can be 10, there can be 12, that doesn't affect the town's contribution of $820,000 to do site servicing in phase 1, and whatever's left over goes towards site servicing at phase 2, regardless of how many residences wind up in phase 1. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. ICAO Hanlon? No. Okay, so just to follow up on my own question, Councillor Race's question, I think this is an important distinction to make. Several times through these conversations, the per door prices come up. Well, the per door price is not, to me, it's not actually a per door price. That's the entire amount that's being invested divided by 8 residences. But it's been brought to our attention, it's not just 8 residences, it's site servicing for phase 2, additional, initial site servicing. That's going to contribute to the construction of phase 2. In addition to which, phase 1 is being built, or infrastructure is being built at a much higher capacity than would be required if it was only servicing 8 homes. It's not. The capacity of that is to service all of phase 2 as well. Because the capacity is bigger, the cost is bigger. So I think continually bringing up the per door cost is a bit of a misleading comment, and it needs to be taken in a holistic vision. When you take a look at the program, there's more there than just phase 1. It's feeding into phase 2, and it's going to create that additional development, get phase 2 going, which hopefully leads to phase 3 and phase 4, and we see a full, robust, excellent adult living, affordable community in that area. And that was what the vision was when we talked about getting that land, and that's what the vision has been throughout the conversation about what we're going to do with that land. Thank you. ICAO Hanlon?
Thank you, sir. Possibly, if I could, just one final comment, perhaps at least for administration on this, is the contribution in the grant from the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation is being considered, and certainly it's the intent of administration to see that unit count go higher. Administration wishes to just stress that it is, yes, for housing units, but it also does go towards the completion of those housing units. And what I mean by that is we want landscaping for these individuals. So there'll be trees, there'll be bushes, there'll be sod placed, there could be fencing. There is contemplated a small playground area in this at first and second stage that's also in this. Now that can be moved around to accommodate, if it came down to an additional housing unit versus say a playground feature. I know I'd be working with my staff to make sure we get that extra, unit. If we don't have the monies for the extra unit, we're going to invest it in some other features and amenities that make this an attractive addition to the town of Hinton.
Thank you, ICAO Hanlon. Council, anything further? Councillor Race?
Thank you, sir. You know what? I'm really glad that you brought up it's not per door, because the heavy equipment that's going to have to be brought in to dig up, to put these all these services in, the people you're bringing in, it's just such a big picture, and we don't take that into account. So I'm glad you brought that up. I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reese. Council? Okay, seeing nothing
Sir,
further.
I apologize.
Sorry, Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I believe the per unit costs are completely relevant to this discussion. When you consider the portion of the $800,000, the government grant, the staff costs that have gone into this, the land costs that have gone into this, the cost of this project is incredibly expensive for what we're getting for it. There are many, many other housing options available in Hinton that would be way cheaper for affordable housing projects. So I think it's entirely irrelevant to the discussion, and it's entirely relevant to how I made my decision And I hope that the number of units go up so that the per unit costs can go down. And I don't think that's any way misleading. It's completely relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, anything further? Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, I guess I'll just speak to that. I have 2 points on that last comment brought up by Councillor Taylor. The first thing is in order to calculate mathematically a per door cost, you have to know how many doors there are. We have identified that there is a phase 2. What we have not identified is how many doors are in that phase 2. So it's completely impossible to take the total cost and divide it by a number of doors, which is X, where you don't know what X is. So whatever number you come up with, it's really, it's not accurate because you simply don't have the final door number right now. What's more important to identify is that this went through a process vetted through the citizens of our town, through a number of charrettes where they came out in public and they said, this is our vision for affordable housing in the town of Hinton. That is a community choice. That's not a council choice. That was a community choice. There was a lot of community engagement that went into that. So again, respectfully, I disagree with Councillor Taylor. You don't have an accurate final number because you don't have an accurate number of doors. And this is something that was driven holistically by the community. So again, respectfully, that's why I would disagree.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we're actually off the agenda topics here, so if there's anything pressing, I would allow council to make one more comment on this, and then we're gonna have to move on to our next item. Go to Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Haas.
Yeah, well, you're true. That's true. We don't know the exact costs per unit. We do know roughly within plus or minus 10 to 20% what the per unit costs of this are going to be. I think I do. And I would hope the council wouldn't be voting on something blindly where they don't even have a clue as to what the per unit costs were. So that would scare the hell out of me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask, we've already made a decision of council on the debenture bylaw, and we've already made a decision on the whole project. So I'd like to move on to the next, and all due respect to the chair, we've already made the comments and the decision's been made. So we're debating something that we've already passed as a motion. So I'd like to move on to the next. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I appreciate that. However, there were councillors that were allowed to speak to it, so it's only fair to give one more opportunity to speak if councillors wanted to. Council?
Well, I'll give mine one comment.
Councillor
Thanks,
Laird.
Mr. Chair. I actually agree with Stuart 100%, except I don't think the citizens of Hinton are served well from walking away from that grant money. I mean, yeah, it's gonna, the cost per unit's gonna suck, and we can debate that and try and make ourselves feel good about it, but the per unit cost for these things is gonna be high. That was imposed by the federal government. It just doesn't make any sense for the taxpayers of Hinton to walk away from that $2 million. So our per door cost to taxpayers of Hinton is actually $625,000 divided by 8. So, you know, we could stand on our laurels, I suppose, and prove what good citizens we are by not taking that money. But the fact is, they're going to give it to somebody else. So I'll support this only because it's the right thing to do for taxpayers in Hinton.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Council? Okay, seeing nothing forward, we are going to move on to 7.2, bylaw number 1168, lease guarantee, Hinton Golfing Society administration.
Thank you, sir. And through you, Deputy Mayor, to the whole of council. We do have, we're on page 40 of your agenda package this evening. We do have bylaw number 1168, the lease guarantee for the Hinton Golfing Society. We just recently, earlier this evening, closed the public hearing, and the recommended actions are provided on here, which is that the council give bylaw number 1168, lease guarantee, Hinton Golfing Society, second reading, and that council give bylaw number 1168, lease guarantee, Hinton Golfing Society, third reading. The background on this is this bylaw did receive first reading on March 1st, 2022. It has been properly noticed, and as I mentioned earlier, the public hearing was open and closed earlier today. The rest of the information is available for council's review, and administration is available for questions, sir. And with that, I'll turn it back to council, and we are able to answer anything you may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, ICAO Hanlon. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the council give bylaw number 1168, lease guarantee, Hinton Golfing Society, second reading.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Did you want to speak to it?
Just briefly, we've been through this. We've done our public hearing. We've done our first reading. We've discussed this with the society. This is just something that I think needs to happen, and they need our support on in order to make happen, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council? Councillor Haas?
Yeah, I'm going to support the second reading of this. It's our golf club and our golf course, and we need to invest into it to make it successful. So I'm looking forward to seeing those new carts out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council? Okay. Seeing nothing further, we'll call the question. Councillor Magoon has moved that council give bylaw number 1168, lease guarantee, Hinton Golfing Society, second reading. Council, all those in favor? Okay, and that was carried unanimously. Councillor Haas?
I'd like to move that council give bylaw number 1168, lease guarantee, Hinton Golfing Society, third reading.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Would you like to speak to it?
I already spoke to you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council? Okay. I will call the question. Councillor Haas has moved that council give bylaw number 1168, lease guarantee, Hinton Golfing Society, third reading. Council, all those in favor? And that is also carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Council, is there anything further on bylaw number 1168 before we move on? Seeing nothing, we will move on to new business. Disc golf course log benches capital project administration.
Thank you, sir. And with this, I'll actually, Ms. Horwath has just joined us, so I'll ask Laura to take us through this item. It's on page 45 of your agenda package, and it's a request for a reserve transfer.
ICO Hanlon, through to council. I also have Mr. Von Claveren here. He's the author of the report to chime in as well if I don't cover anything quite. So basically the short version is this item was lost in the new process of the capital budgets that we took for the 2021 budget process. The Disc Golf Association came before council for their presentation as a civic agency ask, where they did ask for this $1,000 to actually be deducted from what was contributed to their reserve transfer. So it was just a misunderstanding about how money needs to go into a reserve first before it can come out. And then more so is how that process works with our new vetting of our own town projects. So this is a restricted reserve. The group would like to get these into the facility on location this year. It does not affect the long-term planning for this reserve. Instead of addressing it in 2023, we can address it in 2022, and we can get these out for the players and the guests and visitors to that facility. So if you have any other questions, I'm here to ask, as well as Mr. Von Claveren online.
Thank you, Ms. Howarth. Council? Councillor Taylor?
Did I read right? This received a low ranking against competing Town of Hinton projects in the capital plan, and such a low ranking that it wasn't recommended and we didn't approve it in 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Administration?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Taylor. That is correct. When we take projects like this in our partnerships and we vet them against our pure town projects, streets, water, sewer, fire trucks, things like that, it's quite difficult for them to rise up.
out of that process. And so there's a couple comments in the report, suggestions perhaps that council might want to address before they move into their next budget cycle to determine how projects like this perhaps will have a parallel evaluation to them. Again, using the same criteria, it's just when they're competing against sort of the larger overall capital contributions, it makes it pretty hard for $1,000 project to buy 4 benches for the park to compete with our other town projects. And again, the contribution to the reserve for these partnerships are done through an agreement. And so those agreements allocate a certain amount of money each year to go into the reserves by an agreement. So that's not decided annually by council, but through the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howarth. Go to Councillor Haas and then Councillor LaBerge. And then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to be clear, the money is already in the account for this organization. It just was allocated, we allocated part of the budget process, portion towards reserve, portion towards operational. So the money is currently in that reserve fund for them. We're just pushing it ahead a year already. They were talking about doing in 2023. Now we're doing it in 2022 instead. Is that the understanding?
Administration?
Sir, through you to Councillor Haas, that is correct.
Okay, so there's no additional funds that are going to be taken from a capital reserve whatsoever?
If I could, just to clarify, not from the town's capital reserve, but out of an existing reserve account that is intended, and you do see the recommendation that it be funded from the Town of Hinton Disc Golf Course Reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I'm going to follow up on that. I have a clarifying question. When this was originally deliberated as a capital project charter, was it originally going to be funded out of a Town of Hinton reserve?
If I may, Mr. Chair, through to council. Our partnership agreements with our civic agencies, we have an operating contribution and we have a capital contribution. And so that capital contribution goes into a restricted reserve. So this was always going to come from that reserve. All of the work that we do with the bike park, for example, the disc golf, those agreements are funded from a special reserve that, yes, council contributes to. And then typically that's our matching when the group goes out and gets grants, things like that. So this was always going to come out of that restricted special reserve that we set aside specifically for things like this in that facility.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. I appreciate that clarification, because that lends a little more understanding to your comment earlier that maybe requests like this need to be considered differently than Town of Hinton capital projects. If these are funded from dedicated reserves that are, funds that are held in reserve for that particular civic agency to be able for them to do capital projects, for me, it should just be as simple as a request to draw funds from the dedicated reserve, and then that's approved by council through the budget process. But that's not exactly what we're talking about here today. But I do appreciate the comment that maybe this is something we need to look at doing differently down the road. Thank you. I've got Councillor Haas, Councillor LaBerge, you already spoke.
I already spoke, yeah.
Councillor LaBerge, Councillor Taylor, and then Councillor Magoon.
I'm actually good for now, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Taylor.
I think I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
I'd just like to start by expressing appreciation for the questions and the comments from both council and administration. I think it's clarified how I look at this budgetary process for next year a little. I'd like to move that council approve the disc golf course log benches capital project to take place in 2022 with $1,000 to be funded from the Town of Hinton Disc Golf Course Reserve. And if I could just briefly speak to it, Mr. Chair, I think it is certainly a different way to consider how these projects are funded, because really the advice on these reserves that are dedicated to a specific group or a specific organization, it strikes a little bit differently in my head than a town dedicated reserve item. So again, I don't know why I didn't catch that during budget, I guess, but budget's a big thing. other things on our minds as we're going through that process. So I'm happy to support that moving forward today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. I have Councillor Haas and then Councillor Taylor. And just a reminder, we do have a motion on the table now.
Actually, take me off the list. I'll go on afterwards. Thank you. I'm in favor of this. So thank you.
Okay. You want to be put back on after it's called the question? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Taylor?
Oh, I just wonder procedurally if there's any procedures we should be aware of where we make a certain decision on a topic 1 month, and then we make a completely 180-degree decision on a topic the next month. Is there a procedure that goes with doing that?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
The point is councillor decision. I mean, I'm in favor of this, but I'm just wondering if there's something we should be aware of.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Administration.
Sir, if I could, through you to Councillor Taylor, I want to make sure that I'm not guessing what the turnaround between meetings is. And if you could give me some specifics, unless it's bound by council policy, council's not bound by previous or past decisions on any item. They can, but I'd like to speak specifically to the item you're questioning on.
Councillor Taylor, could you provide a little additional clarity?
Yeah, I thought we had a council procedure bylaw that said that when you make a council decision, you can only change that council decision within a certain period of time, 6 months to a year, if you had a higher standard on the vote that came up. And that's to protect council from changing decisions from 1 month to the next. But maybe the procedures were changed and that's no longer there.
ICAO Hanlon.
Sir, I understand better now Councillor Taylor's comment here. Yes, there is a time, there's only a certain period of time in which you can bring items back for consideration by council. I do not believe this item's been before council as a specific item. It was considered as part of the budget, and it has come separately now for consideration on its own. I hope I'm not splitting hairs, but I believe that to the question of Councillor Taylor, that you are fine proceeding on a consideration of this item here this evening.
Thank you, ICAO Hanlon. Councillor Taylor, you're good?
That's good enough for me. It's only $1,000. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I have Councillor Magoon, Councillor LaBerge, and then Councillor Reese.
I'm good to withdraw, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor LaBerge.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking for that same clarity. This didn't come in front of us. I mean, they said, instead of you giving us 5,000, why don't you give us 4,000 and build the benches, I think was the discussion they had. I don't think we made a decision not to do this. So I think this is a fresh decision.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Hinton Disc Golf, they're a civic agency, aren't they? So do we have other civic agencies set up in reserves? This seems a little foreign to me.
To administration.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon, through to the chair, through to Councillor Race. Yes, we do. Through agreements, we try to establish something like a 2 or 3 or 5 year agreement where the groups can do some long-term planning for the facilities that we are in partnership with. So again, the disc golf course, for example, and the Hinton Mountain Bike Park, those are town facilities. They're services that we provide to the community, and we provide that service through a unique partnership with nonprofit organizations. And so it's a town reserve, and the town puts town money into for the partnership. And so whenever they ask for things, that's usually vet through and worked with administration. And then anytime throughout the year, but we try to bring those capital requests at the same time as the capital budget so that it's put in context for council. But there are times throughout the year, as has happened in the past, where sometimes things come up that they have to say, hey, we either missed the cycle or we would like to do this project. And then we know that there's special money already set aside for them for that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reese. Council? If there's nothing further from council, we will call the motion to question. Councillor Magoon has moved that council approve the disc golf course log benches capital project to take place in 2022 with $1,000 to be funded from the town of Hinton disc golf course reserve. Council, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, council. Before we move on, I'll go to Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, I didn't want to muddy up the waters on the motion, but it does bring up something for administration to potentially look at for the future. Because I know, and I'm going to speak from my role on the library board, this has been an ongoing bit of a problem with the library board with the reserves, because they are in holding by the town. And ultimately, in the past, if we wanted to use them, we would have to come to council. Now, any organization, just like this one, can come to council out of a budget cycle and say, hey, I got the reserves. They just need to have council's permission to use them. So it's really, I think, an opportunity for, to see this and look at our processes potentially on how we handle those reserves for these civic agencies and how we can better allow those agencies to use that without having to come to council with these reports, basically. So I'm glad this has come up because it doesn't happen very often. And the library board has found different ways to kind of work with that system and still utilize some of the reserves. But I'm looking forward to the future and to, looking at the different processes. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I'm going to follow up on that. I'm going to ask administration directly if there's anything in the works to address capital project requests from civic agencies that have dedicated reserves moving forward. ICA O'Hanlon.
Thank you, sir. Through you to all of council. I'm going to maybe cast a little broader net in answering your question, if that's okay. Administration has committed to council, particularly to Councillor Haas, to bring back and develop a plan around our 2023 budget process, and a budget process, a policy, if you will, that will capture much of what administration and myself heard from council through our 2022 operating budget deliberations and information and possible procedures and processes that council would have preferred to see. And we want to get that implemented much more quickly. We did hear from Ms. Howarth that there is a desire to maybe treat some of these projects, capital project requests that are funded through existing reserves to civic agencies in good standing with operating agreements with the town of Hinton that wouldn't then be competing for those same year budget dollars through an operating budget consideration. So I would see that being included in this policy discussion around our budget processes so that this doesn't happen in future years.
Excellent. So because that's already in process and coming down the pipe, there likely isn't a requirement for any kind of a direction from council to administration.
Sir, through you to all of council, I believe we're aware of it. There are a number of things around our budgeting process that we seek to improve for 2023, and this would be one that I would be adding to that basket.
Okay. Thank you, ICA O'Hanlon. Council, is there anything further on this before we move on? Okay, seeing nothing, thank you. And that brings us to council reporting. I will start to my far left with Councillor Taylor.
The weather's great here, but I have nothing to report. Thank you very much. Got a bit of a sunburn, but the pain's going away and I have another week and a half. So hope to come back with a good suntan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On March 23rd, I attended the RCMP PAC committee meeting. Just some high level things. Collisions are up this year, although in this quarter, 25 traffic check stops have been conducted. Again, our RCMP continue to commit themselves to improving traffic safety. We have seen a reduction of crime in terms of property and theft, which was for the longest time an area of huge concern for us. So that's really good to hear. Specifically, what that's allowed the members to do is increase the number of intelligence and conditions checks to help continue to keep that down. In terms of community and police visibility goals, It remains strong. In this last quarter, there's been approximately 20 different meetings and events attended by our RCMP, including a second town hall that occurred about 3 weeks ago. They're looking at priority setting for the next year. Consultation for that began in January, and the new RCMP year actually began April 1st. Things that they've heard is that traffic safety and enforcement continues to be a priority, public engagement. So really what we're looking at is some very similar objectives to what we've seen over the last couple of years. From the public safety side of things, MAC reported that there will still be some joint traffic initiatives with the fire department and the RCMP. However, the fire department's ability to participate in those will be confined to the town of Hinton, simply due to overtime demand on the weekend and how that impacts our, I believe, our hours. He'll be looking at assessment of zones for traffic enforcement. It's a requirement of the province. We're currently operating with one CPO. ATE, again, there's an annual report that was pulled back from council. He'll be adding additional information to that, and that will be coming back to council. And then last but not least is that the province is due to review the ATE program. I think that report is due December 1st. That wraps up our meeting for the 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one, I guess, thing to report on is my library board. Unfortunately, we're saying farewell to our current library manager by the end of the week. He's moving on to another position. So we've posted for that position. Our board chair worked with administration to put together the job description and have posted it. So hopefully we get some response from that. We've moved up an individual from working on the floor up to that management position temporarily until we can find a permanent person for that job. We also we invested in a review of our services and organization in the library. So we had a couple of meetings as a board to discuss that with the contractor. This was our first opportunity to sit down with our library manager, and I'm happy to say that some of the initiatives that were brought out have already been moved on, and so our library manager has been working with, and then there's new initiatives coming forward in quarters 2, 3, and 4 as well. So there's a plan for different deliveries of services within the library. So glad to see that, that happened, and looking forward to having a manager we can work with that. So other than that, the other thing I just wanted to mention, a lot has been happening in our community. I live near the fire department and have heard a lot of sirens in the last couple of days. And I just want to, again, a shout out to our fire department. They've had a lot of need for responses over the last few days, whether it's fires, and unfortunately there was an accident. I'm not sure if our local fire department was involved in it over on Highway 16 today, but and thoughts go out to the families, to those tragedies that have occurred over the last couple of days. But to our fire department, thank you for all that you do. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor LaBerge.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. And for myself, I have nothing to report.
Councillor Stewart.
Oh, Councillor Taylor, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was actually a Councillor Magoon, if I could, please.
Yep, go ahead.
You made comments about traffic enforcement and bylaw versus RCMP. Councillor Magoon, did I hear? Could you clarify those?
Yeah, no, just to clarify. Sorry, Mr. Chair, may I?
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Magoon.
Sorry, Councillor Taylor, not specific to bylaw, simply that currently there's one CPO position that's active. And then the other comment that maybe you heard prior to that was simply the joint initiatives between the fire department and the RCMP as they apply to traffic safety initiatives.
Okay.
And how the number of hours on weekends for the fire department would limit their ability to participate because they can't go into overtime. It impacts their budgets. So,
Thank you for that clarification.
yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Okay, seeing nothing further from council, we will move to Chief Administrative Officer reporting and status report.
Thank you, sir. Through you to all of council. 3 items I'd like to speak on. Had the opportunity to participate in the multi-year RCMP budget engagements that was online, and want to thank local leadership for allowing me to participate in there. I think the one thing I'll bring to the attention of council is council is very familiar, of course, with the retroactive pay settlement for RCMP members. There is a similar discussion at this time on possible increases to administrative support, including the possibility of retroactive pay. I did express from an administrative point that the town of Hinton would want considerable engagement in that discussion, and I expressed that there's a considerable implication to our processes, and that coming and kind of suggesting some sort of retroactive pay for something we weren't involved in is very hard for us to budget for, and that we would ask the ability for us to be more greatly involved than with the member settlement that was received, and they understood that. It was reiterated by a number of the other CAOs indicating that, you know, we need to be involved in this in order to budget for it. The second item is just by way of just a reminder to council, and do thank the 5 of the 7 members who did complete the strategic planning survey. I don't know, and again, as I've expressed before, we don't know who has and who hasn't, just that 5 of the 7 councillors and 14 staff have completed it. If you have not had a chance yet as a council member, I would encourage you to complete it, as it is helping to drive that strategic planning session. If you have any questions on that, and if you need the link sent again, please just reach out to me separately and I'll get that to you. We've had a fair amount of public inquiries, and respectfully to council has also inquired on the pool closure. We are preparing a more fulsome response than what first went out, and that'll be brought to council here hopefully tomorrow, if not before the end of the week. And we are committed to sending a little something out to the public as well, to a little more information as to why and how we got here. That's the 3 items, sir, that I wish to share at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ICAO Hamlin. Brings us to council information packages for March 2022. Council. Councillor Hawes.
Yes, I'd like to move to accept the council information packages for March 2022, please.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, any discussion? None. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Administration, are there any notices of motion?
Sir, nothing here.
Thank you. That brings us to our 1 closed session topic for the evening. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that council move to closed session.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Okay, we will move to closed session with a 5-minute break. Good evening, everybody. We will call today's regular council meeting back to order. Council. Toss up. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that council receives the Sage investigation report C-07-2021 regarding a council code of conduct complaint as information.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Would you like to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion. Any Any comments or questions before we call to question? Just before we call to question to administration, we don't see Councillor Taylor.
I can hear you. I can answer yes to the vote if you like, or no.
You're back.
We can see you now, sir.
Yeah, we can't see the motion and Councillor Taylor. Yeah, Councillor Taylor, if you could vote verbally, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if we could see the motion, please. Councillor Magoon moves that council receives the SAGE investigation report C-07-2021 regarding a council code of conduct complaint as information. Council, all those in favor?
Yes.
Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Council? Anything further? Councillor Magoon?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Yes.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.